Stanford University.
Our guest tonight is a remarkably prolific writer, critic, and foremost poet. He's also a student of Iranian literature. He has a PhD from UCLA in Persian literature. He has written his dissertation on the modernist tendencies and the place of nature in the poetry of Ninma Yushij. He's had a very eventful life, a private life. I won't get into it. He has written about it. But for a while, he gave up what he calls, in his own words, his petit bourgeois predilection for poetry. Then, thankfully, he regained that predilection and has published numerous collections of poetry, both in English and in Persian, and works of criticism, works of literary history, and even a prize-winning children's book. He began publishing at a very young age when, in the 70s, I won't tell you how old he was, but just remember that he has been at publishing for a very long time, and if his petit bourgeois predilection hadn't taken away from the writings of poetry and criticism, we will even have a larger opus to judge him by. He lives in Los Angeles, but as he says in one of his essays, his body is in Los Angeles, but his mind ruminates the ruins of a lost revolution in Iran. Mr. Dr. Naficy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Milani. I would like to express my gratitude for inviting me to Stanford. It's a pleasure to be at Stanford as a guest, although I don't consider myself a guest in the Bay Area. I often travel here. I like the weather. It's colder than Los Angeles, and the sky is bluer. And more than anything else, my girlfriend lives here.
That makes you a native.
That's right. So tonight, I'm going to talk about Persian poetry in Los Angeles, nostalgia versus adaptation. Los Angeles is sometimes called Irangeles because more than 500,000 Iranians live there. Most of them have come after or during the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Some of them were beneficiaries of the fallen monarchy, and some of them were the supporters of the revolution, but then became disenchanted or suppressed by the rising theocracy. After arrival, Iranians in Los Angeles established their Persian radio, TV, newspaper, as well as their Persian bookstores, especially on Westwood Boulevard. And also having teaching classes in classical poetry like Maulana or Hafiz classes. Iranians are very proud of their classical poetry, especially Shahnameh, written by Ferdowsi 1,000 years ago. In Los Angeles today, more than 30 established poets live who have published a collection of poetry either in Iran or in Los Angeles. Some of them, like late Nader Naderpour or myself or Parto Nouri Ala, had published their collection of poetry back in Iran during the time of Shah. Some of them, like Abbas Safari and Leila Farjami, publish both poetry in Iran and in Los Angeles at the same time. Some of them, like Katayun Zandvakili and Shole Wolpi, write only in English. And some of them, like Azad Farahmand, write both in English and Persian. I myself first write poetry in Persian and then translate it into English. Besides those poets that I already mentioned, there are many other poets who have published poetry, which I will not get to introduce them tonight, like Hamid Reza Rahimi, Fariba Siddiqim, Farida Sabah, Mandana Zandian, Sheida Mohammadi, Murtaza Miraftabi, Fazlullah Ruhani, Khalil Karbasi, Farzad Himmati, and many others. 14 years ago, on March 20th, 1998, I hosted a poetry reading in Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center in Venice Beach in Los Angeles on the occasion of Persian New Year, in which 5 poets, Nader Naderpur, Mansur Khaksar, Parto Nouri Allah, Abbas Safari, and myself read poetry both in English and Persian. Because Naderpur couldn't read his poetry in English, he kind of hated English. He liked to speak French. So my late friend Harriet Tannenbaum read his English poetry for him. Tonight, in order to kind of demonstrate Persian poetry in Los Angeles and introduce some of the poets there, I would like to revisit this event that we had 14 years ago and introduce these 5 poets to you and read one poem by each person. I will concentrate only on one question. Are these poets still are dreaming of going back to their homeland, Iran, or have they come to some kind of acceptance with their adopted country, with their adopted city, Los Angeles? None of these two tendencies, whether a poet has drowned into nostalgia or a poet has become at peace with Los Angeles, none of them in terms have any merit in terms of literature. Both of these both of these tendencies, nostalgia and adaptation, they are part of human feelings, human characteristics, and we need both of them. As long as we have human beings are migrate from one place to another place or move from one city to another city, we always have these two tendencies. And of course, we also need literature, we also need poets to express them. In Western culture, we have a manifestation of these two tendencies. If you look at Homer's Odyssey, After the Greeks won the war against the Trojans, and they were sailing back home, Odysseus, who was victorious, but because he was cursed upon, he had to spend 10 years in different islands and was longing for his homeland. In contrast to Homer's Odyssey, we also have Virgil's Aeneid, the Roman poet, who wrote the story of the other side of the war, the Trojan War, the Trojans themselves. After they were defeated, they sailed toward Italy, and they started a new civilization. The Trojans started a new civilization in Italy. So as you see, we have both of these tendencies in Western culture as well as Eastern culture. Out of these 5 poets, unfortunately, today there are only 3 of them still living. Nader Naderpour died on 2000 in Los Angeles. And by the way, his anniversary was last week. His burial is in a very prestigious sanctuary in Westwood, where some other American stars are also buried. And the other poet, Mansour Khaksar, he committed suicide on 2010. Okay, so I start with Naderpour. Nader Naderpour was born in 1929 in Tehran. In 1940s, he published his first samples of poetry in different newspapers published by the Soviet-oriented To the Parties magazines. In the introduction to his first collection of poems, Cheshmha wa Dastha, Eyes and Hands, published in 1954 after the coup d'etat, he rejects the Ninma Yushij innovation and kind of adhere to the new classicism of Muhammad Taqi Bahar. He likes new poetry in terms of imagery and diction, but he did not like to, so to speak, break the line of meters, the Persian meters called aruz. In 1960s, Naderpour was the editor of 2 prestigious magazines published by the Art and Culture Ministry. One of them was called Hunar Mardom. I remember that, when I was probably 11 years old, I was subscribed to this magazine. It was very colorful and it had many good articles. Naderpour was also the head of Persian contemporary literature at Iranian national TV and radio. But at the same time, he also was one of the signatories of the Iranian Writer Association in Exile, which signed, they started by signing a manifesto against censorship during the time of Shah. So Naderpur was part of that. In 1980s, after Khomeini came to power, Naderpur left Iran and went to Paris, where his daughter used to live. In 1987, he moved to Los Angeles, where he lived there until his death in 2000. In exile, he published 3 collections of poetry, including Sobh Dorughin, False Dawn, which was translated into English by Michael Hillman. In his last collection of poems, Zaman va Zamin, Time and Earth, published in 1996 in Los Angeles. As you can guess from the title of the book, he wrote poetry about his youth, the time which has gone, and his homeland, the earth, which has turned around. Most of poems in this collection are very dark. They are mostly about fear of Naderpur from coming to old days. He sees nothing interesting in old age. He's very fearful of that. And also, he is longing for his homeland. He has no sympathy with his adopted city. And even sometimes, as can be seen in this poem that I am going to read for you, he has bad feeling toward the inhabitant of Los Angeles. He calls Los Angeles the city of angels, a city of hell. And he considers the inhabitants of Los Angeles as موجودات آدمی وش, quasi-human creatures. This poem is dedicated to Majid Amini, and I asked Majid Amini to translate it into English, which he did for me, and then I edited it myself. Yeah, give me some. Thank you. American Night by Nader Naderpur. The place of my exile is a city on the shore of Western Sea, with old palm trees and new palaces, taller than imaginary giants. This city, for greedy earthlings, is home to the angels, but it is a hell with the beauty of paradise, that from the beginning of illusionary cosmos creation has allowed Satan to its realm. These human-like creatures occupy this city, oblivious to the destiny of their ancestors, are longing for another forbidden fruit. Today, at nightfall, the old sun, in the burning fever of madness, from the peak of the greatest skyscraper, threw itself on the sea cliff and died. And yet, the tall city windows do not believe its black death, as if they are, waiting for a miracle from the East. After its death, there is no stars in this exile night, because all the stars are lost in the warm smoke of clouds, and the sparks of their delicate gazes are only hidden in the small raindrops, as pure as the pigeon eyes. In this night, more naked than black marble, I walk on the carpet of autumn leaves, with my gaze at the passing birds. The tears pouring from the sky and dripping into my gazing eyes resembles pieces of glass that through them stones, plants, animals, and men all look drenched. I inhale the scent of the earth through the air and drink it as a bitter wine in memory of my ruined motherland. And I began to cry, this time through my eyes, from behind its tears, not cloud tears. I see vividly that on both sides of the road, the colorful images of 100 city lights are floating on the rain water puddles. I open a path toward my home in the empty streets of this city city of trees, amidst the humming wet branches, and become weary from the footsteps of a stranger who in the middle of night is accompanying me without being my companion, although our steps are the same. Suddenly, over the faraway trees, the thick smoke clouds began to scatter by the attack of the wind. Night also, ironically, exposes in front of me the unmasked moon's coquettish face, and a masked attacking thief staring at the handgun of this robber. I realize that in the city of angels, Satan and God are brothers. So that was written by Naderpour in 1990, in December 1994. Now we get to Mansour Khaksar. Mansour Khaksar was born in 1939 in Abadan. In 60s, he was the co-editor of a Southern magazine with the well-known novelist, and these days mostly a film director, Nasser Taqwai. In I'm kind of trying to translate them into Christian era. 67, Mansour was arrested because of his Marxist tendencies and was in prison for 2 years. When he came out, he wrote a poem called Karnameh Khun, the story of blood, which became a kind of a manifesto of the young Iranian Marxist called Cherikhay Fedai Khalq, People's Fedais, guerrillas, who took arm against Shah regime. Of course, this poem was published anonymously, and later, when Mansur came abroad, he republished it under his name. In 1975, Mansur went to London, where he worked as a bank accountant, and underground he worked for Fadai's organization. When the revolutionary poet Said Sultanpur, who was in prison, was released 1 year before the revolution and came abroad, Mansur and Said Sultanpur and 3 other Iranian activists who had suffered, like Dr. Milani, sometimes in Shah's prison, they established a committee called From Prison to Exile, Committee az Zindan ta Tab'id, and they put together many gatherings against the Shah regime in different countries. Just before the fall of monarchy, Mansur went back to Iran, and he was part of the southern branch of Fadai's People's Organization in Iran. When Khomeini started the great suppression of Iranian intellectuals, Mansur fled to Soviet Azerbaijan in 1984. And 2 years later, he went to West Germany. After separation from his wife, he moved to Los Angeles in 1990, where he lived until his suicide in 2010. He had 2 daughters who have survived him. Mansur was the co-editor of Daftarhay Shanbe, a local literary organ, the organ of a literary saloon in Los Angeles, which I am part of, and also the co-editor of Daftarhay Kanun, the literary magazine of Iranian Writer Association in Exile. He also was the co-editor of poetry section of Arash magazine, published in France. Mansur has published a dozen of collection of poems in Los Angeles, including Qaside Safari Dar Meh, an ode of a journey in the mist, as well as Los Angelesi Ha. The first one in 1992 and the second one in 1997. The first one, which is, the story of his coming to exile, Mansur kind of look for his individuality and kind of break with his ideological group identity, which he used to have when he was merely a political activist. In Los Angelinos, he has put together 23 short poems, which, in spite of, they are called Los Angelinos, but they are not about Los Angeles. They show a poet who is apart from his adopted city. In this poem that I am going to read for you, and I have translated it myself from page 32 of his book, Los Angelinos, he is in Santa Monica Beach, where he used to live, and he's looking at Pacific Ocean and reminiscing about his teenage years when he was in Abadan at and looking at Persian Gulf. Nothing is better than a sip of water. I am staring at the ebbing sea, and the winter sun has made me naked. I am fully revealed, like a worn-out book. I am a ruin past from a distant tribe, whose palm trees make me naked in the arms of water and fish, and seamen's hum, and an aging memory with no rain on high hills. The night is approaching, and I am standing against it with bitter resources that kindle no lamp. Where is my youth at 20? When I step on horizon and set fire to the house with no fear of tomorrow. The crescent moon has opened its arms in solitude, but does not camp within me. For hours, I've been floating on the shallow water, and the nightly world has been chasing me. To count the delay of returning homes, I planned the paddle of wind in the water and grow in its sail. My vision is blurred. I have made the sky cloudy and sailed aimlessly. Now we get to Parto Nuri Ala. She was born in Tehran in 1946. Her first collection of poems, Sahm Salha, Share of the Years, was banned in 1972. She also acted as an actress in a movie called Dar Huzur Digaran, At the Presence of the Others. آرامش در حضور دیگران, a calmness at the presence of the others, directed by Nasser Taqwai. But that version of the movie was also banned. She got her bachelor degree in philosophy from Tehran University, where she also taught philosophy courses. In 1986 or 87, she moved to Los Angeles with her 2 children. Her husband used to be the famous poet Muhammad Ali Sepanlu. Parto worked as a deputy jury commissioner at the Los Angeles County Superior Court until she was retired, I guess in 2004. She has published 5 collections of poems. The first 2 are mostly about, are written, before the revolution or during the revolution, are connected to the political issues. Her last collection of poems, which was published last year, As Dar ta Bahar, From Gallows to Spring, were written after the People's Uprising in opposition to the election rig in June 2009. Parto considers herself a feminist, and she, as you can see from two of her longest poems, I Am Human and also Four Seasons, in which she narrates the story of women in patriarchal societies. Except one poem that I am going to read for you, rarely you can find any in Parto's poetry. Rarely you can find any references to her surrounding in Los Angeles, or any nostalgia about her times in Tehran. Except this poem, Sad Sal Beh Az In Salha, which was published by Nilufar Talebi and was published as part of Strange Times, My Dear, a collection of Iranian contemporary writers edited by Nahid Mozaffari and Ahmad Karimi Haqqaq. So I'm going to read for you this particular poem, in which you can find both references to Los Angeles and back in Tehran. Five morning of the week, 50 weeks of mornings, my sun rises in the rear view mirrors of buses, and each day in the old courthouse awaits me a small desk, an English Farsi dictionary, a heap of summons, a spiraling justice, and the relentless rings of the telephone. On my cubicle wall, a tacked postcard, white flower stems on black background, a prayer of love between the lines on back, a memory we live. As Schubert passes through my transistor radio. On the opposite wall, there is an image of Maya Angelou, Ahmad Shamlou, freeways, maps, and the rendition of love poems by Paz. All days the files run through the copier, as are throbs of my tongue in the veins of the most foreign language. Each dusk returning home, I hauled passerbys in search of my lost days in Los Angeles, and asked the policeman after that young woman whose hands were chained in this house of fortune. Many happy returns. The voice of he who is in love repels through my house via the answering machine. A feverish drop waters the burned jasmine leaves, and then, traipsing in books and stitching clothes, reading, writing, washing, scrubbing, surfing the web, typing, sewing, weaving memories thread to thread, one by one, mouth stitches, one stitch over, one stitch under, one rose crimson, one the color of sorrow. And when night falls, so the heaviness of habit scars not my days, hidden from the moon, I unstitch the old thread. and send my keen eye, clad in the gilded gown, off to tomorrow. Abbas Safari was born in Yazd in 1951. When he was a teenager, he wrote lyrics for the late popular singer Farhad. In 1979, he moved to Los Angeles, where today he lives with his American wife and 2 children. He used to have a small business in waterproofing, but now he's retired. Abbas was the poetry editors of 2 Iranian magazines, Sang and Cactus, used to be published in exile. And he has published a few collection of poems both in Tehran and in Los Angeles, including Tariq Roshanay Huzur, The Darkness and the Lightness of Presence, Old Camera and Other Poems, and the Burned Matches. Contrary to the other 4 poets of our brief survey tonight, Abbas rarely writes political poetry. In his 2 recent collection of poems, one can see a tendency toward pun, in other words, playing with language, as well as satire, as can be seen in this poem, which he wrote in 2005 from his collection Burnt Matches, published in Tehran. And I am using Nilufar Talebi's translation, published in her book Belonging, Poetry of 18 Poets in Exile. So another sip of water. Saturday night dinner. The onion I will grate to keep the stream of my tears from drying. The potatoes you peel for your sleight of hands with skins. Let Nusrat Fatah Ali Khan, the Sufi minstrel, play, for he opens us a window to Konya, the window adorned with narcissus, sleepy eyes, and languorous, and a handful of homing pigeons. If they call from master's guard, or the internal, I don't have any income services, tell him he's gone to Kashmir, looking for the long-lost polo ball of King Aurangzeb of India, and it is unclear when he will be back. Don't laugh, my darling. Cultural misunderstandings dismiss the disturber quicker than hollow conversations. Now while this aged Indian rice ripens, put 2 glasses lip to lip near our hands of our oldest vintage 4-year wine, a reminder of century past. A sip of good wine is enough to erase an entire century from one's memory. Sip after sip, we can backtrack so far that after dinner we can find ourselves in moonlight of palm groves of Mesopotamia, and around midnight in a primordial plains, naked and boundless. Majid Naficy, myself, was born in Isfahan in 1952. My first poems were published in Jong-e Isfahan when I was 13, and my first collection of poems in the Tiger Skin was published when I was 17. I was very active in the Iranian Revolution against monarchy, but after the new theocracy came to power, they started killing people, including my first wife, Ezzat, on January 7, 1982, and also my brother, Saeed. I fled Iran in 1983 and finally ended in Los Angeles, where today I live with my son, Azad. He now has become a rapper and hip-hop artist. In fact, tonight he has a performance in Los Angeles. I have published a dozen of collection of poetry, both in English and Persian. Now, just kind of to wrap up this conversation, I would like to summarize a little talk that I had in 1995 called A Reader Within Me. I delivered that talk in a symposium sponsored by American-European Relationship at USC in 1995, in which I say that when I left Iran, I brought the reader that I had within me, on horseback, first to Turkey, then to France, and then to America. For half a dozen, when I wrote poetry, I still wrote for that reader from Tehran. I preferred a reader, which preferred cholo kebab, I guess, to American food. He spoke English with a heavy accent, as if I don't do it today. And also always, censored his surroundings. I always wanted to write about a Tehrani reader. I wanted to write in a way that a Tehrani reader can understand it without any cultural references. If you look at my second collection of poems, which was published in exile in Sweden, called After the Silence, Pas az Khamushi, maybe less than 10 poems are about Los Angeles. The others are all about Iran and Iranian experiences. My body was in LA, but really my soul was still rummaging through a revolution which was hijacked by a clergy. When we come to my third collection of poems, or called Anduhe Marz, Sorrow of the Border, the proportion of poems which are about Los Angeles drastically are increased. Especially, I have a very long poem which I wrote for my son Azad, in which not only I cherish his birth in Los Angeles as a new roots of myself within my adopted country, but I also juxtapose English sentences within the Persian text. So in different ways, I was trying to bring to express my surrounding, my living in exile within my poetry. My next collection of poems, شعرهای ونیسی, Venice poems, which I wrote when I lived in Venice Beach for 7 years. As you can guess from the title, they were mostly about Los Angeles, of which some of them our late friend, our late common friend, Ardavan Davaran, published when he put together perhaps one of the first collection of Persian poetry in exile, which was published in one of the issue of Fairleigh Dickinson's literary journal. A turning point for me was a poem which I wrote on January 12, 1994. 1 week before the Northridge earthquake, in which, as you will hear, I declared, that I am at peace with you, Los Angeles. A fragment of this poem was engraved by the city of Venice on 2000. When the city of Venice remodeled the boardwalk on Venice Beach, they engraved 16 fragments from different poets, which were related to Venice Beach. Like what's his name, Bukowski and other poets. So if you go to Boardwalk and the intersection of Boardwalk and Brooks Street on Venice Beach, you can find this poem there. In this poem, I have portrayed a parallel, a symmetry between coming of Iranians to Los Angeles with the migration of Parsis from Iran to Gujarat. As you know, today Parsis, the Zoroastrians, there is a community in India called Parsis. When the Arab Muslims invaded Iran, they migrated to Gujarat. And in 1599, a Gujarati Parsi called Bahman Kegobad put together a short epic called Qisse Sanjan, the story of Sanjan, which, in imitation of Shahnameh, the Iranian epic, he tells the story of coming of Parsis from the Strait of Hormuz to the port city of Sanjan in India. So this is the last poem that I am going to read for you, and then we'll take it from there. Ah, Los Angeles. Ah, Los Angeles, I accept you as my city, and after 10 years, I am at peace with you, waiting without fear. I lean back against the bus post, and I become lost in the sounds of your midnights. A man gets off Blue Bus 1 and crosses to this side to take Brown Bus 4. Perhaps he too is coming back from his night on campus. On the way, he has sobbed into a blank letter, and from the seat behind, he has heard the voice of a woman with a familiar accent. On Brown Bus 4, It rains. A woman is talking to her umbrella, and a man ceaselessly flushes the toilet. I told Carlos yesterday, your clanging cars wake me up in the morning. He collects cans and wants to go back to Cuba. From the promenade comes the sound of my homeless man. He sings the blues and plays guitar. Where in the world can I hear the black mourning of a saxophone alongside a Chinese chimes, and see this warm olive skin through blue eyes? The easy moving doves rest on the empty benches. They stare at the dinosaurs who sprays dull water on our kids. Marzieh sings from a Persian market. I return homesick, and I put my feet on your back. Ah, Los Angeles, I feel your blood. You taught me to get up. Look at my beautiful legs, and along with marathon, run on your broad shoulders. Once I got tired of life. I coiled up under my blanket and remained shut off for 2 nights. Then my neighbor turned on NPR, and I heard a Russian poet who in the death camp could not write his poems, but his wife learned them by heart. Will Azad read my poetry on the days that I take him to school? He sees the bus numbers from far off and called me to get in line. At night, he stays under the shower and let the drops of water spray on his small body. Sometimes we go to the beach. He bikes and I skate. He buys a Pepsi from a machine and gives me 1 sip. Yesterday we went to Ramtin's house. His father is a Parsi from India. He wore sadre and kosti while he was painting the house. On that little stool, he looked like a Zoroastrian, rowing from Hormuz to San John. Ah, Los Angeles, let me bend down and put my ear to your warm skin. Perhaps in you I will find my Port San John. No, it is not a sheep touching a rocky shore. It is the rumbling number bus 8. I know I will get off at Idaho and will pass the shopping carts left by the homeless. I will climb the stairs and will open the door. I will start the answering machine, and in the dark I will wait like a fisherman. Thank you. If you have questions, please make a noise because I don't see well. I won't be able to see your hands or your feet.
Majid, this is Ezzat.
Hi.
I want to ask you your opinion about, because you talk about Naderpur.
Yes.
And you are familiar with his poetry back in Iran. And then when he moved here, your opinion about what happened in between? Like, you remember Sher Angur?
Yes.
And then here, Zilzile Khane Larzan. These the drastic changes in he could not adopt what happened after the revolution when he came here. He was really bitter about his presence here, people, Los Angeles, and all of that. Do you see this in all of the, more or less in all of the poets that came from around here, or he was just exclusively to Nader?
Well, maybe he was, the most extreme kind of nostalgic poet. Next to him, from these 5 poets, I would put Mansour Khaksar, who was also very much longing for his homeland. But if we want to get to the, personal reasons why Naderpur felt the way he felt, we might say his age, because he kind of came in a later period of his life to Los Angeles. He didn't know English, and he never tried to learn it. Although, he had classes for a time in connection to UCLA, but sometimes, just outside of academia. He had classes. He had shows on Iranian TV. He wrote for Persian magazine. He was not disconnected from Persian community abroad. But he didn't like to be here. He was, in one of his poems, he says that I could not stay in Iran, and I had to live in Iran. But at the same time, I don't like this city either, Los Angeles. I don't like to be in exile either. So, از اونجا مانده, از اینجا رانده. That's, he saw nothing familiar to himself, whether back in homeland or here in exile. I don't know if it answered your question.
But in your talk, you said nostalgia and adaptation per se they are feeling and they don't have any literary value in themselves. Do you think that the expression of these feelings by these poets, which seems to be, for most part, a little dark, a little bitter, has contributed to the literary movement of Iranian poetry? Thankfully, in yours, I do see a lot of hopefulness, adaptation, acceptance, infusion of humanity.
Thank you. Well, when I said, it doesn't have, I said it doesn't have a literary merit. One does not have literary merit on the other. Although nostalgia, I would imagine, is not a good recipe, for a person who is in exile and cannot go back home. But I cannot say, because I write poetry which is more adaptive to my new cities, so because of that, my poetry is better than a person who mostly writes nostalgic poems. Basically, I wanted to say that we need both of them. And if Naderpur, writes nostalgic poems, or if Mansour writes more longing poem for his homeland, they're not necessarily less important than, my poems or Abbas poems, which are more adaptive to our new environment.
If I may follow up,
Sure.
Does this reflect like a maturity in introspection because of the situation that a lot of people, like many of us here in exile, feel? Or is it merely reflective of the bitterness of a defeat, of a political defeat?
No, it's more than just a political issue. Yeah, in the beginning of their coming to exile, the poets, as you can as I expressed in my own case or in Parto's case, they were very much involved and very naturally with what happened, in Iran, what happened in revolution, and so in that respect, they were not about their new environment. But after a while, when the dust lay down and the new regime, was able to establish itself, and then the everyday issue of bread and butter came in, the issue of you have to learn English, you have to find a job, and the rest of issues that everybody is dealt with. Then I think people and poets started to show two different tendencies. And if one, is more adaptive, it doesn't mean that that particular poet never writes nostalgic poems. Or if one poet like Naderpur or Mansour mostly write nostalgic poems, they never write adaptive poems. Did I answer your question, or just I talked to myself?
No, I felt your answer.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I follow up on that question?
Of course.
Would you not say that, not in a sort of literal sense, but in a larger sense, nostalgia is the essence of poetry, and that there is a fundamental difference between adoptiveness and nostalgia? Nostalgia is the stuff of old poetry. If you adopt to your reality, there's very little to be poetic about. Would you agree with that or not?
Well, yes and no. I mean, if you read Shams Qais, an Iranian prosodist in 14th century, he says the first person who wrote poem was Adam, who wrote poetry after the death of Abel. Yeah, in poetry, when you look at the poetry all over the world, in every culture, they are mostly about longing, about the absence of something, about sorrow. But at the same time, you have poetry of joy, in different ways. Like someone might see enjoyment and joy in mysticism, which is a kind of longing itself, or maybe in erotic poetry, love poems. Love poems, you can write a lot of love poems that are about your joy. And back to your question, if you are adapted to your new environment, there is less left to write about. No, the sense of curiosity, how you want to melange, how you want to mix these. The old way of thinking, the old way of feeling, with new way of thinking. These are all very challenging. These are all very new avenues that have not been paved the way. And a poet can write about them, a poet can discover them. So, in fact, the new environment, because of its ambiguity, because it's something new, you know, it's like the first look that you put into reality. The new wave, the new ways of looking at things because of the new language. These are all new sources that you can bring to poetry. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. But that is a form of longing. That is defamiliarizing the familiar and rendering it strange and longing for a new understanding. But that's بشنوازنه چون حکایت میکند. It's about longing. If that is the manifesto of Masnavi, I would submit that a sense of nostalgia is very not in a literal sense. I meant it not in the sense of accepting Los Angeles. How can you accept Los Angeles if you don't learn English? I mean, how can another poor expect to be welcome in Los Angeles if he makes a concentrated effort not to understand it, not to speak it, not to join it? All he has, I agree with Ezzat. I mean, another poor became sort of intolerably bitter about things that there was no reason to be bitter about. I mean, Los Angeles was nice to him, much nicer than anywhere else. But he made no effort to understand Los Angeles, and he had this romantic sense of entitlement that the poet must be angry at the environment, and he has the right to say anything about the environment that he wants.
May I make a point and ask another question in that vein?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about American poetry of Whitman and others, which does not focus on nostalgia. It's very hope-filled and progressive. Dr. Milani has pointed out to us in several of these affairs that there is currently a kind of renaissance underway for Iranian arts, culture, literature in the diaspora and in Iran, in spite of the suppression. So I've asked you to comment about hope-filled poetry coming out of Iran, maybe on the internet, or are you aware of anything like this happening, a resurgence of poetic feeling, maybe revolutionary poetry in Iran? Or in the diaspora, let's put it.
Yeah, we have, we have good poetry coming out of Iran and written in exile. But I would rather not to, name anybody.
Because?
I'm more safe. Well, in Los Angeles, I have listed a few names, and besides that, there are other good poets, both in America, like Ali Zarin, who lives in Denver, or what's his name, Mani. He's a very good poet. He lives in Germany, and Mani, Mana Aqai, who lives in Sweden. There are many poets. And in Iran, we have Shams al-Angarudi, we have Hafiz Musavi, which I like his poems. We have Granaz Musavi, who lives abroad. So we have many poems.
So are these people living under threat and censorship?
Those who live in Iran, yes, of course. Yeah, they do. Okay, sure. And by the way, that was a very good example of helpful, joyful poetry, Walt Whitman. In fact, Walt Whitman was the first poet, who inspired me to write. I was 11 years old when At that time, I think it was in 60s, 2 collection of poems were published bilingual, from English into Persian. One by Robert Frost, translated by Fatullah Mujtabai. But because, you know, he had tried to compose it in meter, he has really ruined the poetry. I really hate, you know, people who try to. It's not an easy job, you know, because you become a versifier. But quite the contrary, Muhammad Ali Islami Nudushan has translated Leaves of Grass into free verse, really beautiful.
It seems like it would fit into other forms of Persian poetry.
Yeah.
Better. Free verse.
Yeah, I think so. Anyhow, so that's a very good example of poetry which is not nostalgic. Although, you know, I mean, of course, because he was under the influence of Emerson and the whatever transcendentalists, he had some kind of, you know, mysticism and kind of longing for the whole universe, you know.
Pose another question in that vein.
Okay, but should
universalism.
Okay.
Where is the universalism of Rumi and Hafiz in Persian poetry today?
Okay. Can we see what Reza wanted to ask and then get? Okay, sir.
We're talking about nostalgia in the poetry. Like Parto, it seems to me because Parto had dedicated herself to her family here, the children, the mother, and others around her, and feminism. Therefore, you see there is no really connection and nostalgia or bitterness about whatever happened in Iran. The only thing you see is about women, her critics of films and others. You know that she's so bitter about films. Even recently, she really criticized the separation. So there is, you know, because she's dedicated. She left Iran. She left husband. She was bitter about that. But here she was dedicated to something else. Feminism and her family. So you don't see nostalgia.
Yeah. One time I asked her, why is that? And she said, you know, when I was in Iran, I came from one man's house to another man's house. What is it that I, crave for? Nothing. And her experience, back in Iran, her poetry was not really published. She played in both theater and movie, but they were not really shown. They were censored. So you're right. I think so. You're right. Okay. Now get back to your question. The universalism of Hafiz and Rumi and what?
Where is it?
In Walt Whitman?
No, in Persian poetry now. Contemporary Persian poetry. Is it there? Because it's not a strain that's recognized as, what do you want to say, Islamic. Universalism.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have written myself, I don't know if you can Google it online. I have written criticism of, what's his name? Who's the American translator of Rumi? No. The most very popular one. No. God. Yeah, Coleman Barks. Yeah, I have written a criticism, about Coleman Barks, and also I have my own views about Rumi's poetry. I don't, take it at face value. I think, but I think it goes beyond the extension of this session. So there is that universalism, of course, in Rumi and Hafiz, but it's very different from universalism based on individual rights. That's my main point. This is something that we saw and we encountered mostly in Western literature. The importance of individuals writing about specific, not about just abstract. This is something that you don't find in Hafiz or Rumi. I'm sorry, kind of, maybe I made your question upside down, but and I take issues, with people who want to copy or revive the same kind of religious universalism that Rumi and Hafiz used to have in the past, without, looking at the new environment and our new world. I think it needs a big adaptation, a big change. More questions, or that's it?
I have a question.
Okay.
Going back to the Naderpur and the discussion we just had about nostalgia and all that, I want to look at it a different way as a commonality between Naderpur and Khaksar. You mentioned they both started as a Marxist or communist ideas, and they moved on through their political experience or life experience, and then they moved to U.S. for various reasons. But I do see a commonality here, and that's hopelessness rather than nostalgia. The hopelessness meaning the old belief of what they believed in.
Yes.
Mansur Khaksar maybe remained the same way in his thoughts, but maybe Naderpur changed, but he didn't want to show that change, so therefore it created a sense of hopelessness. Do you see that in their poetry as far as hopelessness, or are you still seeing it as nostalgia?
Well, I kind of put them together. I think if you are nostalgic and if you are too much drawn into nostalgia, then you feel hopeless and helpless. They come together. Yeah, I agree with you.
So is that one of the reasons, like for example, Khaksar might have committed suicide, or if that was the reason, or is
I have written about it. If you want to Google it, I wrote an article published in shahrvan.com called Omid va Nomidi Mansur Khaksar. There were specific reasons that he did that, of which he speaks a little bit in his different letters of will. If you are interested, you can find them in one of the issues of Zaman magazine published in Denmark. That specific issue, which was dedicated to Mansur, was edited by Khosrow Dawami.
Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.